Are you ready to learn what it takes to be a successful attorney? You're listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. I'm sitting down with some of the most successful attorneys so you can learn how they made it to the top of the legal industry. You'll hear their advice for how you can forge your unique path to success.
Amanda Hettinger, I am so excited to have you on Corner Office with Elise Powers. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat this morning.
Perfect. So you have the longest list of roles that I think I've ever seen with a guest. So let me just give the background on you. So you live in St. Louis and are a partner at Thompson Coburn. You started as a summer associate and have been there going on 23 years. Now a partner. You co-lead the Business Litigation Group, which has about 115 attorneys. You're the co-chair of the Diversity Committee. You sit on the Women's Steering Committee. You sit on the Litigation Review Committee. You sit on the Partner Mentor Committee. And you've served on the Compensation Committee and Nomination Committee. Did I miss anything?
Sometimes I have a hard time keeping track, but that sounds like a pretty complete list.
Unbelievable. So I'm interested in knowing, if you think about the roles that I just ticked off, which one have you learned the most from?
That's kind of a hard one to answer because I've taken away so much from every single one of those roles. But I probably would say co-chairing the BizLit group, really because it's everything, right? It's business development, it's marketing, it's handling the budget, it's associate development, it's mentoring, it's recruiting, it's making sure, that we have good interplay between our offices. And then it's the business side of things, right? And so I've learned so much more than just the practice of law through that. I've learned how to be an effective manager. I think I was already showing some of that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this role. And the importance of being able to change your leadership style as you need to, right? People respond to different things, and especially in a group this large, some people need more or less or a different style or, more of a listener or more of a counselor. And so I've really learned to put on multiple hats in that role.
It seems like, the role of practicing law and just not just being an attorney, but being an attorney is so different than the role of leading a huge organization, really, is what you're leading. You're almost like a co-CEO where you're thinking about all these other facets and the people management and the almost administrative aspects. Did you know you wanted to take on that type of role, or were you kind of surprised in yourself?
Absolutely. I was surprised in myself. So, one thing that was always very important to me as a young partner was, I'm a woman in litigation, right? There aren't a lot of us at big law firms. There certainly weren't many at all when I will say, growing up as an associate. So it was really important to me kind of from the outset to find some leadership roles at the firm because I thought it was important for the women coming behind me to see somebody sort of in those roles and speaking out in those roles. But really my focus at that point was mentorship and development of associates. And I loved that. And I still love that. And that's what led to, I was the vice chair in the group first, literally got that role 2 weeks before we all went to work from home from COVID. So Definitely dove into the people management in sort of a quick fashion. But I love the business side of it too. And that has really surprised me. I love working with our business development manager and our marketing manager. Sometimes it's harder for me to find the time to do that for myself anymore because I'm doing so much else. But supporting our attorneys and helping them, and then just really understanding the finances of the firm and better understanding, this is a business at the end of the day. It's a great place to work. We have wonderful people. We're a people place where we serve our clients, but, you got to keep the lights on too, right?
Yeah. How have your relationships with other partners in the group changed, if at all, since you became co-chair?
I really don't think they've changed that much. There are certainly, with a group as large as ours, I didn't have, strong relationships with everyone in our department. And I'm still not going to lie and say that I have strong relationships because we have multiple offices and I have other co-chairs in those offices, right? So we each kind of have our role. But it's probably deepened it a bit. And certainly, I hear a lot more of what people need. I will just put it that way, right? Something's not working or this, and before, it may not be my door that they darken. Now it is. But still being able to maintain, friendships and be even more of a helper than I probably was before.
Yeah. So you have kind of this behind the curtain view of how people feel, what they want, what they're unhappy with, and for better or for worse, you know it all. So like what % of your day is spent on group management and leadership versus servicing clients?
It's like litigation, never day. No,
Mm-hmm.
it's never the same, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are periods of time, like over this past summer, I had a huge commercial arbitration in New York, and 0% of my day for 2 months had anything to do with this, right? That's why I have my colleagues. But on a normal day, I don't know, it's maybe 2 hours, especially, if I'm like coming off the holidays right now, right? I'm focused on, okay, everybody's sort of back in that work mode. Is there enough work for our associates? How are we dividing the work? That I've spent a fair amount of time on that this week. And it's budgets. We did the budget, but now we're getting the budget. And it's like kind of taking a harder look at, okay, here's what we submitted. What can we actually pay for? What hard decisions are we going to have to make this year? So it's taking a little bit more, because I call this kind of a housekeeping week. I try to keep Monday through Thursday as much work related as I can. And then Fridays are kind of my, okay, what needs done in the practice group, or what needs done for the diversity committee, or what needs done for this or that, or what projects do I have? Have I looked at our strategic plan lately? It helps me to kind of have boxes, but it doesn't fit, right? Like somebody came in my office yesterday to announce some pretty big news. And of course, we needed to take 30 minutes to talk about that.
Right. Yes. You can't even predict what will come in a given
No.
day. So a lot of associates, as they're thinking about just even, do I want to become partner at a firm? The question is that emerge often involve, well, I'm going to then have all of these non-billable responsibilities, or even just the delegation to associates. That takes a lot of time. I can't just put my head down, get the work done. When you became partner, as you've taken on all of these other roles as co-chair and sitting on different committees and then becoming the co-chair of the group, is it that the hours expected of you to work with clients, your billable requirements, I know that's not your focus necessarily right now, but is it that goes down because there's this understanding that you're taking on so many other more firm citizenship roles? Or is it you become more efficient and you somehow get it all done? Or like, how does that work so that you're not working 24/7?
Some of it is both efficiency, but it's also responsibility, right? Like I don't have to first draft a brief anymore. I rely on a really good associate to do that. And I might, on the type of cases I work, I probably have a junior partner too who can sort of do that first round of editing. So that helps a lot. I may scare your listeners away when I say that I billed 2,000 hours last year, but it's because of that arbitration, right? And I had been working on that for years, and there was no way I wasn't going to do that. And that's what we do as litigators. But then this year, who knows, maybe I'll only bill 1,500 hours. I will say, and I think for anybody thinking about making partner, if they want to make partner at a firm, really take a hard look at the culture of your firm. Because for me, I find personal fulfillment in doing all of these roles. It makes the firm a better place. It makes our associates stronger, our community stronger, and those are important things to me. But if the firm didn't value that, would I still want to do it, or would I be happy doing it? Would probably be the better question to ask. And here there is a lot of value in it. Having sat on the compensation committee, I kind of have a better view of how we value those things. And it's also the case that I have partners that don't do any of this, right? I have partners that just want to be service partners and they just want to bill the hours and, manage their workload as best they can. And I have partners that are like me that want to, get involved in firm management, maybe falling short of being on the actual management committee. I'm not, but have enough management adjacent roles. And then there are partners who, sit on one committee and that's enough for them. So I don't think you have to do it my way in order to say, okay, I'm going to be a partner. But that delegation is huge, and having a team in place that you can trust is huge. I couldn't do all of the roles I do without that team in place.
Right. I'm sure you've understood each person's strengths and you know who to delegate to for what. I always feel like money is not talked about enough and it's on everyone's mind all the time. So I'm curious if someone's evaluating, like if I want to really take on a leadership role on a committee, or if I want to think about co-leading my practice group, how do you have those conversations with leadership around will I be compensated for it without it seeming so transactional?
Yeah, well, one of the things that someone who I consider a mentor at the firm who has a lot of roles, just like I do, said to me pretty early on as I started taking on more. She said, track your time. Don't just put it to office. Figure out what the billable code at the firm is for budgets and for, associate development and for this and for that. And bill to those specific matters. And then when you're making, I don't know, every firm is different, but we do basically compensation reports on ourselves at the end of the year. Make sure you include that in your submission and you talk about it at your comp interview. And so I did from an early stage, and I made it clear that, look, I know the hours I bill, again, are what keep the lights on. I never lose sight of that, right? And I love practicing law, and I don't ever want to, just do the business side of things. But having, you can have, again, it depends on the culture of your firm, but here I could have those conversations to say, this is really important to me, but, I want to make sure that, if my hours expectation falls from 1,700, and I'm just making numbers, but from 1,700 a year to 1,500 a year, does that 200 hours still get seen, right? And the answer was yes. So, you just have to have that conversation in my view, but you do it in the appropriate way. And I certainly never took the position that I'm only going to do this if you pay me for it, right? Because it's more than the money. But again, it'd be hard to do. I'd probably have one role, not 7 roles,
Right.
if it were really impacting my take-home pay that much.
Well, and I also think that there needs to be this recognition that every single person is expected to do non-billable work and attend trainings. And, maybe you're involved in recruiting, and sometimes people lose sight of that, where they want, how do I get paid to come to this workshop that you're requiring me to come to? Like, you're expected to be there. It's part of your job. So I do think that there's this discretion that's needed on what warrants a conversation and what is just kind of baseline expectation.
100% agree with that. I mean, we have an ethical obligation as attorneys to attend CLEs and to stay on top of the law and what have you. And that, our associates get certain hours credit, up to a point. I do feel like, and everybody talks about the generational differences, and they don't want to get too bogged down in that, but it does seem like I always understood that the firm was a community, right? And there are a lot of perks to that. If you have, I'm reminded right now, someone who just went through something terrible, one spouse works at very corporate America, right? 2 weeks off, you're back in the office. Here, because of the community that we are, because of the way the firm is, I don't know when this person's going to come back to work, and it doesn't matter, and so that's a benefit that you have to sort of understand as part of the reason why this isn't just an 8 to 5 job. Especially, in corporate when you've got the big deal, and litigation when you've got the big deal. But it isn't just about billing hours, because you have to become part of the firm.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in like a scary, like John Grisham way to date
Yeah.
myself, but contributing to the firm, contributing to the culture, bettering yourself, that's all part of being a successful attorney and serving yourself and your clients the best way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it goes both ways, knowing that the firm will have your back because you've invested in going above and beyond for your practice group. And then, when you really need the support of others, they will be there. But I don't think people can lose sight of it is a two-way street to make that a reality.
Right. You articulated that way better than I did. But that's right.
So, Amanda, you've said that, something that's helped you be so successful is that you know when to be outspoken, when it is important for you to share your perspective. I think that's something a lot of women especially struggle with is, I don't want to come across too strong, or I don't want to overstep, or I don't want to be seen as bossy, or whatever the perception is. How do you decide when you do need to speak out versus I'm just going to let this go? It's not that big of a deal.
Sure. And again, I'll get back to some mentoring advice I got from the man that was sort of my everything as an associate. As a young associate, I spoke up about something that in his view I should never have spoken about. And so we had a difficult conversation that day. And what he told me, and actually I recently heard this in the marital context too, but it was, is this something that's really going to matter to you 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now? Or is it just something that you're angry about or you think needs dealing with today? And if it's something that you think is more shorter term, think harder about whether it's really worth the conversation. But if it is truly something that you think is, and he didn't use the word fester, and I hate to do fester too, because it's such just a negative word. But if it's something that you really feel like could change things for the better, is a policy that needs to be looked at harder, and it's something that is, if it's not fixed 3 years from now, it's still going to be a problem, that's when I really think, okay, I have to talk to someone about this. Now, in some of my roles, like co-chair of the diversity committee, sometimes I am talking and being outspoken about something that's mattering right now, right? I think recent events yesterday are an example of that, right? So it kind of depends on also what role, what hat I'm wearing at the time. And one thing that drives me crazy, and I try not to do, is ever go to someone on management or exec with a problem without a recommendation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of people that come into my office with problems, and it's, okay, what do you want to see? I don't know, right? And that's not helpful.
Yeah.
So I try to also not speak until I've done some research. I've, done sometimes I call them my focus groups. I'll go talk to a couple of senior associates if it's a, younger associate bringing something to me, or if it's a partner issue, I'll talk to kind of a microcosm of partners. But I always try to have a solution. And it's never, my way or the highway. It's, hey, this is going on. I wanted to make you aware. There are many ways we could approach this. But for example, what if we thought about doing X? And sometimes X happens and sometimes it doesn't. But I've never had a conversation shut down, and I've never had something that I really felt strongly about that didn't result in a change. But I think it's being political about it, right? It's also understanding who to go talk to about it helps a lot too.
I want to blast from loudspeakers at every single firm the importance of bringing solutions when you identify an issue. It makes all the difference in the world in how you are perceived and how receptive someone's going to be to what you have to say.
100%.
Yeah, it's showing I'm trying to move the ball forward. I'm making every effort to not just add work to your plate, you go figure this out, Amanda, but I've put some thought into it, and these are a few ideas I had that I wanted to get your thoughts on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If everybody would come to my office with that mindset, my job would be a lot easier.
Yeah. And would you say a general rule is to not broach these topics or really speak out forcefully when you feel emotional, when you're in the heat of it?
For the most part, yes, I definitely feel that way. Again, I have to kind of temper it a bit with that diversity committee role, because sometimes you can't help but let the emotions get in the way, not getting political on your podcast. But, there are people that are hurting after certain things happen, and showing some emotion as a leader is important. But if I'm going to executive or I'm going to management about something, I try not to keep emotion into it. And if I'm, again, it's that advice I got from Steve years and years ago. If I'm angry or emotional about something, I need to stop and pause and think, what is motivating this? And again, is this like a short-term thing that we can get over, or is it something, that's going to take a longer time? And if I'm going in with a solution, that by its nature is going to cause me to take some time and get less emotional about the issue.
I love how you mentioned that you'll do, kind of informal focus groups where you just kind of float an idea past someone, get their thoughts, figure out, are others in agreement with this being an issue? And you've also mentioned you have mentors and people who have really invested in you and in your development over the years. Everyone wants what you have, right? Like the goal is to have strong relationships with people you can trust. And that's really the foundation here is you must trust those people you're going to for their advice, for their input. And I'm sure there's sometimes when you expect them to not share with others what you are talking about or what you're bringing to their attention. How do you determine if you can trust someone to keep something private? Because I think there's a lot of associates that would love to get advice about a really difficult partner they're dealing with, but I don't want the partner to find out that I've been talking about them.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard one, right? I mean, you do have to have a measure of trust, which is something you can't always, you can't control other people. For me, it's getting to know people, right? If someone is a gossiper at the firm or, comes to me with news, and that's not to say that I am not ever a gossiper at the firm. I am not perfect. But, they're probably not going to be the person that I go talk about, oh, we've got this issue going on and it's, involves personnel or, HR,
yeah.
not like at a private level, but just imagine this is happening and how would you handle it type thing. They're probably not going to be the person that I go to talk to. I think looking for those mentors, though, is really important. And I think looking for those mentors in your practice group is really important. Whether, for a young associate that might be listening to this, I had a mentor really early on who was a rainmaker, probably the most successful partner at the firm who took an interest in me. And that's awesome. It's not going to happen for everybody. But I look at some of my young associates and how much they rely on my senior associates. And one thing I'm careful to do is never ask the senior associate to share something they're not comfortable with, right? I don't want to invade that trust. So it doesn't always have to be a partner that you're finding, right? And I do think there tends to be this line between associates and partners where they're not sharing things a lot. Although we did have a young partner sit at our table yesterday and I was laughing. He was like, I don't feel comfortable at the associate table anymore. I feel like they're not talking freely anymore. I'm afraid I don't have much better advice than that, but you just watch and listen and kind of see people's behaviors. I think people show you who they are if you're really watching.
So what I'm hearing is pay attention to how they talk about others or share what they've heard from others. Like,
right.
It's the classic, like, I need to tell you a secret, but don't tell anyone. She told me not to, and you're like, I'm never telling you anything ever.
Right. Or share something you don't really care about, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
So that's a red flag. And then I like how you mentioned that it requires an investment of your time to get to know these people on a personal level, because my guess is someone's going to be much more respectful of not sharing when they understand you as a person and they know about your family, what you're going through, whereas you're just kind of knocking on their door like, hi, remember me? I'm Elise. I'm not sure if you remember we talked 2 years ago. So it really takes that ongoing effort to foster and nurture these relationships.
Yeah. Nothing makes me happier than to sort of be at a local bar or at the lunch. We have Wednesday lunches that are all attorneys, to see genuine friendships between my associates. I feel a bit like a mom, but I look at it and it just makes me smile because it creates some trust. It creates some mentoring opportunities. But when you're friends with the people you work with, work is so much more fun.
Totally. Everyone wins.
That's something I tell young associates all the time. Do not treat this as a transactional. I'm going to come in, work in my office, not talk to anybody. That is not the way to be a successful human, let alone colleague.
And I think people who have that approach are the ones who are resentful if they have to work past 5 p.m. or if they have to help out a colleague after hours or on the weekend. You are going to be happier and much more successful if you think about this as I'm joining a team, a community of people who I care about, and we're all kind of in this together.
100%.
So we talked about trust from this lens of finding people you can confide in and get advice from. You had mentioned that, when you think about delegation and who you want to delegate to, you have 40 plus associates in your practice group. You're going to delegate work to the people you really trust who are going to get it done. Trust is only earned over time. So if a summer associate or a first-year associate is thinking, well, I've only been there 2 weeks. How can I build trust? What would you say other than you get the work done by the time that they asked you to get it done, which is like baseline expectation?
Right. But although it's a baseline expectation that I've seen not met on numerous occasions. But yeah, so there's a couple things, right? The baseline is you get the work done on the time that you said was done. The second is I love it when I meet with an associate face to face and we talk about the project, and then they go back to their office and, within an hour or two, they send me an email and they say, here's what I understood from our conversation, just to make sure we're on the same page, and that way, if there was, because sometimes people hear and talk differently, right? Or interpret differently. I never did that as an associate because I always felt like I was kind of going to bother a partner. But I will say from my perspective, I actually love it because it tells me you understood. So that's one thing that I'm always impressed when an associate does. The other is a lot of times as a young associate, your projects are going to be transactional. And I don't mean corporate litigation. I mean like the one-off project, right? But do two things. One, once you turn in that project and a little bit of time, 2 days, 3 days have gone by, come back to me and say, hey, have you had a chance to look at it? Do you have any feedback? Is there anything, next time that I could do better for you? The other is it goes really far with me when you show a genuine interest in my case, right? You have to be respectful of my time. I don't have, 6 hours to talk to you about this case that's gone on for 5 years. But if I'm asking you to read some depositions from a related case and kind of, not summarize them, but pick sort of the key themes from them, ask me a little bit about why that's important, or, how are these themes going to impact your defenses, or how do these themes impact your claims? And don't spend more than 5 or 10 minutes on it, but to show something, and maybe that's after you get the project done too, right? So I did this for you, and it made me curious, like, how does this fit into the bigger picture? Because when you show that you care about my case, that's going to make me trust you a little bit more. The other thing is do the things that, and again, this is project focused, but I may not remember as the senior partner on the case to tell you to read the protective order if it's dealing with exhibits or something. Read the protective order. Make your paralegals your friends. Or, if it involves a judge, even if I don't tell you to look at the local rules, and don't bill 0.5 hours for this, right? Some of it is you just got to do on your own, but glance at the local rules because maybe there's something that's impacting this project that I don't realize. So it's kind of that above and beyond thinking too always really impresses me and helps me get trust pretty quickly. And then it's word of mouth too. Like the trust doesn't always get earned directly with somebody, but if I'm talking to my friend Mark and he's like, John just did this project for me and it was awesome.
Yeah.
That goes a long way too.
Yes.
Make sure not only to get the work done and on time, but impress people because we talk.
Yeah, of course. It's your reputation that's, based on your own actions with each individual and also what people are saying about you when you're not in the room. So perfect. I have so many follow-up questions. You had mentioned the importance of just looking into little things like the local rules and just trying to take a little bit of initiative and have a sense of ownership of I need to understand the lay of the land here. One question that comes up constantly with especially first year associates is what do I bill for? If I'm going to do, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, how do I know when I should bill for that and when I should just say, like, it's expected that I know this and I don't know this, so I'm just going to do it and not record it in my time?
Yeah, and it's a hard one to answer, right? To me, that's always a question you can ask a senior associate about, hey, Amanda gave me this assignment. It's preparing a pleading. I spent some time looking at the local rules. I and it I know this is the hardest part of being an associate. Certainly I went through it. Every partner's different, right? I tend to think if it's something that I'm doing just because I want to make sure that I'm doing it right and it's point two, point three, I don't bill for it. I didn't as an associate. I don't now. If it's something like reading a protective order where I really think I need to know this and it's going to have substantive knowledge of the case, I might say to the partner, hey, I think I should look at the protective order. Are you okay with me doing so? And if they say yes, to me, that's billable, right? You can ask that explicitly. But in some ways, it's a judgment call, and it's hard when you're a first year to know what the judgment is, which is why I think it's really important to just, I have a hard time believing any firm doesn't give young associates at least an associate mentor their first year. If you don't have one, ask for one. But that's what your associate mentor is for, because they built some of that judgment. But, I had a situation recently with a young associate in a different office than mine, but the partner called me. They billed point 0.9 to looking at the local rules. There were 3 local rules, right? Like, that's not okay.
It's so hard because some firms will just say as a general rule, you record everything you do and it's the partner's decision to write it off. And then you get partners who say, why would you record that? Like, do not bill for that. And so I really understand the frustration and just the difficult situation associates are in.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, it is the partner's job to write it off. I think the reality of it is, though, in that example, which is a real world example, and that partner did write off the time, but it showed a judgment issue that someone billed point 0.9 to that, right? Something that I could read in 3 minutes. And so you kind of have to ask yourself, what am I doing here? Am I expressing something about my judgment? Is this the appropriate amount of time? And again, we associates, especially young associates, aren't supposed to self-edit their time. And we see it happen all the time, which is why I think it's also, when I talked about that email summarizing it, I think it's so important to have that upfront conversation. How much time do you expect me to spend on this project? And if I get close to reaching whatever that limit is, to go have a proactive conversation about it. What I don't think is okay is if, they say, if the partner says, take 5 hours and it takes 9, you only bill 5, right? Like, that's not how to do it. If sometimes as a partner, I forget that this is actually a 9-hour project because I haven't done this type of work in a while. But kind of as in with all things, it's communication. I'd feel more comfortable if I look at the local rules. Are you okay if I do that? Or, and that shows some initiative to me too, that you're thinking of that.
Yeah. And I think it's just taking a moment to step back. How will the partner respond if they saw this? Like, is their reaction going to be, of course you would do that. That makes a ton of sense. It would take me that long too. I am just thinking about a partner at a firm who was telling me about they got all the expense reports because associates were traveling, and this associate expensed a $2 candy bar. And the partner's like, are you serious? Like, we pay you how much and you're expensing a $2 candy bar? And it's not that they couldn't expense the candy bar. It's just the perception of that just can irk someone.
Yeah, it's that smell test, right?
Yeah, yes, right. So you had mentioned the importance of associates following up a couple days later, essentially asking for feedback. Did you get a chance to read through it? What could I have done differently? You had mentioned that when you're working with in-house counsel, you'll ask them for feedback. How do you go about doing that?
So it has a lot to do with that relationship that you build again, right? It all, whether you're at the law firm or talking to your clients, it's about the relationship you build. And so I'm lucky that I kind of work for bigger corporations on bigger matters that last years. So I create these relationships. And I don't want to pretend like I ask for feedback after every single project, right? My clients have busy jobs themselves, but if we have a hearing and they attend the hearing, hey, let's talk about it. What were your impressions of it? Anything that was, I just had a hearing before a state Supreme Court, and the client flew in with me. And as we were driving to the airport, I was like, I always can Monday morning quarterback myself, but I'm just curious, is there anything that I didn't say today that you wish you would? And thankfully he said, no, I think you said everything perfectly, but if he said, no, actually, I wish you would have spent a little more time on that, and making him comfortable with answering that question, right? Which, was the result of 3 years of us working together beforehand. But one of the things that was most impactful for me, and again, this happened to me as an associate, and it was a partner who did this, is we actually concluded a case. And it was a small case. It was kind of one of those, you're sharpening your teeth as a young associate. So I was running it. But as we were closing the file, he said, hey, let's call the in-house counsel. And I was like, okay. And just make sure, it's okay to close the file and there's nothing ongoing, which is always important to ask. But in that course of that conversation, he said, hey, Bob, do you want Amanda to put together a memo on lessons learned for the business from this litigation? How do we stop this from going forward? We won't charge you for it. I billed it. He wrote it off. But would that be? And the client was like, wow, like, yes, I want that.
Yeah.
And so not every case is appropriate for that, but it is something now that I always think of when a matter concludes. And I've had a number of clients ask me to do it or been impressed and been like, oh yeah, I should be asking my attorneys to do that. And so that's kind of the easiest way to do feedback, because you're giving value for free to the client, which they always appreciate. And it doesn't take a lot of time, because if you spend a lot of time on the case, it's not hard for you to say, oh, gosh, if they had turned left instead of turned right at this critical decision point, we would have never been here. Or had they included this clause in their contract, we would never be here. Or think about this period versus this comma, and just to crystallize that in a way that, your client can then share with their business people who are their clients. It builds a lot of trust. And usually during that conversation, you'll get some feedback from the client, and you're offering feedback to the client as well.
I love how you approach that. I think of it, in my work with firms, we will lead a professional development workshop and then we'll do a debrief. And I always like to say, if we could go back in time, what would you have wanted to do differently? Or what could we have done to make this an even better experience? And when I do hear ideas, it's usually something where I'm like, oh, well, we could do that right now. That's not that big of a deal at all. Where they might say, oh, I wish we had like a one pager we could have delivered. I wish we put that in our contract. And I'm like, I'll get it to you by the end of the day. So I think making that effort to say, I want to make sure you feel so good about our work together, and jumping at the opportunity to do anything you can to get them to that point that's above and beyond even what would be expected. Well, Amanda, I just have so many takeaways from our conversation, from how to ask questions in a way that really builds trust with another person, to thinking about asking for feedback and showing that you want to continuously improve with your clients and not being scared of what they say. And really, I think a theme is just to view your career as an integral part of your life and to invest in it. Like, lean in. Don't forcibly lean out all the time. You have to build these relationships, show up to things, and build that goodwill. So thank you for your time and insight. It's truly been such a pleasure.
Yeah, it was great to meet you and to chat this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn for weekly tips on how to accelerate your career. If you're loving this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd click follow on your favorite listening platform. While you're there, give us a 5-star rating. If you're interested in having me speak at your organization, or if you have topics you'd like us to cover on the podcast, send me a note at info@eleviewconsulting.com. That's info@eleviewconsulting.com. All opinions expressed by Elise and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Eleview Consulting or any law firm. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as legal advice or the basis for legal decisions.